Imagine losing someone you loved, someone you also resented, someone you prayed for and prayed against, all in one phone call. That's the kind of grief nobody prepares you for. Not the clean kind, the complicated kind. In August 2011, Dr. Riva Tims received the news that her ex-husband, Pastor Zachery Tims, the man she had built a church with, raised 4 children with, divorced, and was still spiritually connected to, was found dead in a New York City hotel room. He was 42 years old, and within hours she was standing in front of thousands of people, not falling apart, not running away, standing, steady, speaking. This is the story of what she said, what she did, and how she walked through one of the most public, most painful, most complicated seasons a woman of faith could ever face. Before we get to Riva's response, we have to understand what she was responding to. Zachery Tims was not a small name. He was the founding pastor of New Destiny Christian Center in Apopka, Florida, a megachurch with thousands of members. Charismatic, powerful, the kind of preacher people drove hours to hear. He and Riva built that ministry together, side by side. She wasn't just the pastor's wife, she was co-founder, co-visionary, the woman behind the pulpit even when she wasn't behind the microphone. But the marriage broke down. There were reports of infidelity, there was a public divorce, and Riva had to rebuild herself, her identity, her calling, now while still co-parenting 4 children and navigating the awkwardness of being the ex-wife of one of the most visible pastors in Florida. That alone would break most people. Then came August 12, 2011. Zachery Tims was found dead in his room at the W Hotel in Times Square, New York City. A white powdery substance was later found nearby. The New York City Medical Examiner's Office would later confirm the cause of death, acute mixed drug intoxication. He was gone, suddenly, publicly, controversially, and every eye turned to Riva. August 15th, 2011, 3 days after his death. New Destiny Christian Center is packed. Over 2,000 people sitting in those seats, grieving, confused, some angry, some scared. What is this church without its founder? What happens now? And then Riva walks in. She doesn't have to be there. She is the ex-wife. She has every right to grieve privately, quietly, far away from all of this. But she shows up. Because that is who she is. She stands before that congregation and she says something that stopped people in their tracks. She says, Zachery's death may have caught us by surprise, but it has not taken God by surprise. Let that sink in for a moment. Not we are devastated. Not we don't understand. Not how could God let this happen. She anchors the room in theology before she lets them spiral into panic. She reminds them that God is not reactive. God is not shocked. And if God isn't panicking, neither should they. She calls the church to come together as one body, to advance the kingdom, to not let the enemy use this moment to scatter what God had built. 2,000 people, raw grief. And she holds the room. That's not just composure, that's calling. She also shares something personal, something tender. She tells the congregation that just 1 week before Zachery died, just 1 week, the family had taken a trip to Puerto Rico together, all of them, her, Zachery, and their 4 children. She called it a divine opportunity, a chance for him to fellowship with his sons and daughters, to be present with them, to make a memory. Nobody knew it would be the last one. You have to wonder, did she know something? Did she sense something? Or was it just a mother trying to give her children time with their father? We may never know. But what we do know is that in the middle of all the messiness, the divorce, the distance, the public scrutiny, there was still a family, still love, still grace. Here's what people don't talk about enough when they tell this story. Riva Tims was not just dealing with grief, she was dealing with grief on a national stage, while also managing the narrative of a ministry, while also parenting 4 children who just lost their father, while also navigating questions about what her role in the church would now be. That is an extraordinary amount of pressure. And let's be real, the optics were complicated. There were people who blamed her for the divorce, people who believed she should step back entirely, people who said the church needed new leadership and she had no business being involved. And there were people on the other side who believed she was the rightful spiritual mother of that congregation and deserved a say in its future. She didn't hide from any of it. She quoted Psalm 119 publicly. She leaned into the word. She told her followers to press on. Don't give up. I will survive this, and so will you. That message hit differently because she meant it. This wasn't a performance. She had already been surviving. The divorce had already taught her something about resurrection, about what it means to rebuild when the thing you built together falls apart. She knew what it felt like to start over. She'd been doing it for years. As the months passed, the question of New Destiny's leadership became a real and public dispute. Paula White, prominent televangelist, later a spiritual advisor to a US president, was appointed as the new senior pastor of NDCC. And Riva Tims took issue with that. She filed a lawsuit. Now, before anyone raises an eyebrow, understand this. Riva was not litigating out of bitterness. She made that clear. She described herself as the spiritual mother of that church. She felt an obligation, not just a personal one, but a generational one. These were her people. She had watched them grow, prayed over them, named some of their babies, and she felt the family's voice needed to be heard, so she made noise, nationally. But then, in January 2012, she withdrew the lawsuit. On her attorney's advice, yes. But she didn't frame it as defeat. She didn't frame it as giving up. She said simply and powerfully, truth will prevail. God is in control. 5 words. That's all she needed. There's something deeply mature about knowing when to fight and when to release, when to hold the line and when to trust that the outcome is above your pay grade. That's not weakness. That is wisdom that comes from walking with God through enough battles to know which ones are yours to win and which ones belong to Him. Now, here's the part of Riva's story that I think doesn't get enough attention. It's easy to admire someone's public composure. It's a lot harder to understand what it cost them in private. In the years after Zachery's death, Riva wrote a book called When It All Falls Apart. And in it, she opens up in a way that is raw and real and deeply honest. She talks about forgiveness. Not the surface kind. Not the "I forgive you," you say, to close a chapter. The real kind. The kind that changes how you see a person. The kind that only God can work in you when you're willing to go deep enough. She writes about how she began to pray for Zachery. Genuinely pray, not perform. And as she prayed, something shifted. She says, "When I began to pray for him, I began to see the root of his struggles." She saw the pain underneath the behavior, the wounds that drove the choices, the man beneath the pastor. And she says, then, and only then, forgiveness came. That's not a formula. That's a testimony. That's somebody who did the actual internal work. She also speaks about Zachery's substance abuse, and this part is complicated, so stay with me. In 2013, she clarified something publicly that a lot of people had questions about. She said that during their marriage, she had not fully known the extent of his addiction, that it wasn't just a struggle he was fighting. By the time of his death, it had become a lifestyle. That's a heavy word, lifestyle. It implies something beyond occasional failure. It implies something ongoing, something hidden, something sustained. And for Riva, acknowledging that wasn't about disparaging a dead man. It was about naming the truth, because the truth is what sets you free. Pretending that someone was without fault doesn't honor them. It just delays healing for everyone around them, including the children who are trying to understand what happened to their father. She gave her children honesty, not cruelty, not bitterness, but honesty. That's a form of love that not everyone is capable of. So what do we take from all of this? I think we take several things. First, grief is not linear, and grief doesn't wait for you to be ready. Riva Tims had to grieve in real time, in public, with a microphone in front of her and thousands of eyes on her face. She didn't get the luxury of falling apart first and speaking second. She had to do both at the same time. And she did. Second, love is complicated, and that's okay. Riva loved Zachery, even after the divorce, even after the pain, even after everything. The trip to Puerto Rico wasn't just a nice gesture, it was an act of grace. It was a woman choosing to give her children a memory they would never get back. That kind of love doesn't announce itself. It just shows up,